Well, good morning, and I'm so glad that you could be here today for the What Works webinar series. Um, I'm really excited about our topic today because measuring ROI when it comes to marketing is one of the most challenging parts of marketing, and it's where I actually get a lot of questions. So the What Works series began because when I would go out and network and talk with clients, I was always asked the question, what works when it comes to marketing? And so this series is built around bringing together different experts from different fields to talk about different marketing aspects, things that you can incorporate into your own marketing efforts to really improve what you're doing to stay relevant today, new ways that you can engage with your customers and grow your customer base. And so measurement is a really important part of that whole piece of marketing, being able to say, okay, these efforts, when I do these things, really work. And when I try these things, they're not as effective. And so maybe I need to throw that out of my marketing strategy if it's not working for my specific target audience. And so Todd is here today to talk a little bit about, qualitative versus quantitative, but really get into more of the what questions should you be asking of your business to really be effective at marketing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get us started. So our topic today is winners are made in recession, an ROI conversation. And so this really is about figuring out, how do you weather an economic downturn? How do you make sure that your marketing is still being strong to help you grow in this, in periods of uncertainty? So what we're going to be talking about today just our agenda for today, we are going to be talking about I love technology. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about marketing strategy versus tactics. So this is where, this is probably my favorite thing to talk about. And I work a lot with companies on creating a marketing strategy that is aligned with your goals. And so what's the difference between a strategy and a tactic? And then I'm going to turn it over to Todd. He's going to talk a lot about current versus cumulative effects of marketing. We're going to talk a little bit about what's your investment perspective. What's your budget, what's your run rate, and what's your sequential plan? And I know those may sound really technical as we're starting out, but he's going to go through all of that and explain to you. And if you have any questions at the end, we're going to open it up for a Q&A. So let's talk about creating a marketing strategy and what's involved in that. I use a system I call the 5 keys, but this is really just the communication process. The first part of this is assessment. And where I find people like to jump into all the sexy stuff. And so let's start planning and throwing marketing at the wall like spaghetti. But really, you need to take the time to do an assessment and an evaluation at the end, which is why I'm really excited about our topic today. So the assessment part is really establishing your company identity, identifying your customers. This is taking the time to build your brand. Who are you, as a company? Why do you do what you do? What sets you apart from the competition? Really understanding what are those key messages that you're going to need throughout your entire marketing strategy. And the next part is your goals. What are your business goals? What are you trying to accomplish by the end of the year? And how can you use marketing to help you achieve those goals? And really set some metrics for yourself on, is your marketing effective? Is it working? Do you need to make tweaks along the way? And then the third part is planning. And this really is the fun part where you're figuring out, okay, now that you know what goals you're trying to accomplish, What tactics are you going to use? Is it social media? Is it email? Is it outdoor advertising? Is it digital advertising? There's so many different options available to you, but what is the right mix for your specific audience? And then it's just a matter of executing the plan and then evaluating the results. On a marketing strategy, I really like it when it's in a shorter time frame. Maybe it's a quarter, maybe it's a few weeks. It's depending on what that goal is you're trying to accomplish. But having, going long enough that you can really evaluate what's working. What messages really resonate with your audience? Where are you seeing the most, whether it's lead generation or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, what messages are resonating with your audience, and then also figuring out what's not working. Because if it's not working, maybe it needs to be tweaked, or maybe you just throw it out of the plan completely, because the last thing I want you to do is waste time and money on things that don't work for your business. And so evaluation is such a key tool. And so I'm so excited about what Todd's going to be talking about today. All right, so let me introduce Todd Barker. So Todd is a financial advisor with Edward Jones. He's a founder and partner with an online website and design company and a business coach for strategic alignment. In his 20-year professional career, Todd has started and led a large multi-location organization, 4 nonprofits. He's become an assistant golf professional and a few other surprising things. He has a master's degree in organizational leadership. And most importantly, Todd is married to an incredible wife, Holly, with 3 kids, Easton, Kate, and Mila, and a dog named Yodeler. All right, Todd, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Thank you for the intro. And Elizabeth, I love the strategy versus tactics. I think that's a great conversation, a great place for everyone to dive into marketing. And so, as I kind of pull up my slides, I want to start with a story this morning. I was starting my career as a financial advisor, and crazily enough, right out of the gate, I was in conversation with an 82-year-old man who had millions of dollars. And so you can imagine, for me at least, you can imagine that here I am. I'm a young kid, kind of, so to speak, starting out, and I'm talking to this multi-millionaire who's 82. And he had built this great life for himself, and he had businesses. And so I'm intimidated, right? I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my goodness, how, yeah, sure. I have education, I have licensing, I have these other things, but this guy's got life, he's got wisdom, and he's made it. He doesn't need me, right? There's that intimidation factor of how can I actually help this man? And so I sit down, and instead of pulling out my spreadsheets and my candlestick charts and nerding out, I decide, okay, let's just have a conversation. I want to understand what you want to do. I want to understand you. And in the process, I said, hey, what made you so successful? And he proceeds to tell me his story. And his story went something like this. And obviously he does better because he's him, but here we go. He goes, well, when I was really young and times were tough, I had a mentor who sat me down and said, winners are made in recessions. He said, every time the market dropped, I put in an extra $200, even if I didn't have it. I was like, that's it? He goes, that's it. And I was like, okay, so what else? And then he starts talking about the success of his businesses. And he took that same mindset into his business. And he's telling me about his first family vacation that they took. And this is in the 60s, okay? And he's taken this family vacation, and they're at the beach. And he's noticing they're in the Pacific Ocean, these huge waves, just huge pummeling waves coming at them in the Pacific Ocean, and he had never been in the Pacific Ocean. He starts sharing how he noticed that if you took a defensive position, and he's watching all these people that are scared of the waves, and they're taking these defensive positions, the wave, like a self-fulfilling prophecy, smacks them and throws them backwards, and they end up close to shore. But the people that took an offensive approach dove into the wave, and they ended up deeper and on the other side in a better position. I think that's a lot how we need to take our mindset when it comes to our businesses. We want to dive deeper in innovation. We want to dive deeper in marketing and in gaining market share. We want to provide better opportunities, and there's no better opportunity to capitalize on your investment than when everything else around you is depressed. So with that being said, winners are made in a recession. I hope you found the story fun. I do, for sure. And when you're trying to measure return on investment, you only have hindsight to look at, right? You can't look at it necessarily in the moment, but you need to have some strategic plot lines along the way where you're saying, okay, how often are we going to look at this to know if we need to pivot and change? And so we'll jump into some of that. We want to talk today about like what's the immediate versus long lasting, what are the metrics that we want to look at, sales funnels, all of those things are part of it. And so let's jump in with the effect of marketing. Elizabeth, you can jump on and give me an answer, or anybody can from the crowd. I'm going to ask a question. If you do marketing right, what is the result?
I mean, it's business growth, it's revenue.
I get more clients, I get more customers, we get more dollars, right? If you're doing it right, that's what's happening, right? It sounds simple, but basically marketing is, at its core, in my mind at least, it's about creating these effective sales funnels. And so you're marketing in ways that drive customers, clients, revenue through certain things to where you grow your business, your company. And that's what marketing does. But the effect of marketing has different pieces. So going back to your tactics versus strategy, here we have the effect of marketing. And so what I mean by that is you have a sales funnel that is cumulative, meaning over time, the effect of all the things that you've done has its own presence, has its own field, has its own energy, has its own return on investment versus what you're doing right now that is more current. So you have this current, like, hey, I'm in this strategy, I'm in this moment, I'm in this season, versus a cumulative. And so just to kind of break that down for you, both of these are sales funnels, and one informs the other. For example, a cumulative effect might be, I have a huge email marketing list. Well, they might be in a campaign, but the cumulative effect of all of your strategies, right, is that you have a bigger email list in the first place. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's this back and forth between these two. And when you're building out current marketing, I love what you said, that you want to put timelines around it. And so here we go. When I'm putting out a business plan, I can't control the results. And so when you start saying your goals, almost always people talk about their goals as output goals. And I'll use a silly example that's not related to business. If I said, I want to lose weight, I want to lose 10 pounds. Okay, that's great. That's a great goal. We'll lose 10 pounds. But that's not really anything you can control. That's just a nice wish out there in the universe. You should speak those kinds of wishes, but it's not actionable. And so current marketing puts an actionable plan rather than just, hey, I want to grow by 5%. We want to do things that we can actually track and control. And so that input activity. So going back to our gym example, if I want to lose 10 pounds, it probably could be like, hey, I know what I can do. I can go to the gym 3 times a week for an hour. I can limit my calorie, to, 2,200 calories or whatever that number might be. But those are things that we can control. So when we're building these funnels, we have the current plan. So let's just take some real-time examples. My current plan might be, hey, I'm on a 3-week campaign where I am running specific trackable ads, whether it's A/B emails or whether it's, social media boosted post or everything. And I want to basically have a click rate or a conversion rate, meaning people respond to that ad and I get the lead or I get the sale, whatever that looks like in your industry, because it's different per industry. For me, it's I get the conversation, right? In my world, it's not a transaction. I don't start with transactions. So it's I want the conversation because that's going to lead to opportunity. And if I don't get the conversation, I'm never going to get the opportunity. So that's my world. But some people, if you have a specific product or it's very transactional, like if I was selling a cool mug, right? I could say, hey, buy this sweet mug. And I have some sort of video ad and people are like, oh, I love that mug, I want it, right? And they can click on it and that happens. That is a current effective marketing, right? What it does though, is if your product is good, I can't help you there. If your service is good, again, can't help you there, right? And if your systems are good, that's where Elizabeth comes in, right? So use her for that. She'll help you. Then all of a sudden you start building this cumulative effect. So if I do enough campaigns, people start to recognize my brand. If I do enough of these marketing pieces, I build goodwill if my product is good and I follow through on what I say I'm going to do. And all of a sudden I create referrals and brand ambassadors, and there's this depth of relationship. So one is things that I can measure and control, activity that I'm doing. The other one is basically the effect or the results of it that also propel my campaigns higher because we've built that cumulative effect of marketing. Any questions about that before we jump further?
Well, I talk a lot about, this is very much the difference between marketing and branding is really how you would say this. Marketing are all of those actual tactics, those tangibles, those things that you can, see and measure. Branding is more of that. What is the emotion people get when they think about your business? What are they thinking about? Are they, brand loyalty? Again, that if your customer service is good, if your product is good, think of all of those companies that you're like, if I need to buy shoes, I'm only going to buy Nikes because I know what I'm going to get every time. Really, that brand loyalty is, and that depth of relationship that you're talking about here is so important for future purchases. The more loyal your brand ambassadors and people that love your business, the more they're going to refer you to others. And so
absolutely,
having both the marketing, the quantitative and the qualitative is so very important for your business.
So before we get into the ROI, I really wanted everyone to just kind of use this as the framework, the lens through which we're seeing everything else. Because if you don't get this, you're going to maybe misunderstand what the tracking, the measuring really looks like, because you're going to be thinking about maybe some things that you can't control versus the things that you can. And so they inform each other. And we're going to talk about how, we don't want to set the short term up for what, let me rephrase that. You want to set the short term or your current efforts up for the long-term win, not steal from your long-term for short-term wins. And so we'll jump into that here. History has a lot to teach us. So we're in, it's not officially a recession until the job numbers come down and we're losing jobs, which is what the Fed wants. That's a conversation for a different day, not this webinar. But we're almost in a recession and we're definitely in a very economic downturn season. It's definitely a bear market. Like obviously all the things that you could say, it's bad out there right now. It was bad in 2020 for those months of COVID. It was bad in 2018 for a hot minute. It was really bad in 2007, 2008 in the dot-com boom, in the recession of 79. And so from, the last 45, 50 years or so, there is a lot that we need to truly consider. And so history has a lot to teach us. And the truth of the matter is, the businesses that make the biggest impact, they double down when the markets are down on marketing and innovation. And so let me say this. More companies were started in the recession of 07, 08 that have become multi-billion, with a B, billion-dollar companies than at any other time in history. And so when people are seeing the wave and they're fearful, the initial emotion is to get defensive. And what happens? You get blown back. Mm-hmm. If you want to be offensive, you end up on the other side, deeper and in better position. So a couple of quick examples. Lego, the toy company, 2008, on the brink of really going into a regression as a company. And they see this opportunity, their stock, way down. They're a Danish company. So if you don't know about Legos, everybody knows the toys Legos at this point. But as a company, they were not in good shape. They had done some things for themselves that weren't good. And they decided to double down in a new marketing strategy. And if you don't have kids, then you may not know this, but they developed a line in 2008 called Lego Ninjago, and they partnered it with their TV show. And they specifically said, what's our market? Well, we're big in the US, we're big in some places. Where do we have opportunity? And they wanted to be big in Asia. And so they literally made the Ninjago for Asia, okay? A huge, huge market. And they tripled in that season from 2007 through 2009, they tripled their marketing budget. And what happened out of that was and is still to date their highest grossing toy that made them the most money, and their return was phenomenal. And it set them up for additional partnerships, which they were already doing with licensing, but it set them up for new and innovation. So now they have Lego Friends, which is targeting girls with a different design. That also came from 2008. Anyway, so we don't have time to get into all of that, but you think about how innovation and doubling down in marketing happen. Warby Parker, if you wear glasses, you have been targeted on Facebook by Warby Parker at some point. And they started in 2008, and all they did was run ads by finding people on Facebook that had pictures of them in glasses and targeting them with their cool, cheap glasses direct to consumer, and sent you a box and said, the one that you want, write it in here, send it back, the rest we keep, and we'll put the lenses in and send it to you done, right? And now they have like cool AR where you can try glasses on virtually. But it was founded by marketing. They didn't have a physical space. They weren't working with doctors. They said, how can we do it better? And in a time when people were spending less money, they said, well, we can do it cheaper, but how do we do it? We have to go direct to consumer. And so they did, and they formed this new brand, and now they're one of the largest lens brands and frame brands in the world, not just the US. And if you didn't get ads in COVID for Warby Parker, you weren't on Facebook with glasses. So there you go. And so we can talk about a lot of them. Some of the big ones that I think you probably recognize is Netflix coming through the dot-com boom, almost going bankrupt. Back then they had DVDs in sleeves and they would mail them to you. People don't realize this anymore, but they used to be a service that mailed you DVDs, and they upped their ads in 2000 on the verge of bankruptcy by 38%. And then they boomed that business and they reverted that base and innovated in the recession of 2007 and 8 to be all digital, and took their streaming platform from what was really a titleless no man's land before that to something that is the juggernaut that it is today. And they didn't have original content. And so this is massive, massive, massive company, and they did it through marketing. Okay. We could talk about how Southwest Airlines became Southwest Airlines. In the late 70s recession, Southwest Airlines was a tiny little airline ran by some innovative people. And they decided that in that recession, they were going to double down their marketing, and they were going to buy up unused planes, unused routes to smaller airports in major cities, which is why they're at Love Field in Dallas, not DFW, which is why they're at Hobby in Houston, not the President George W. Is it George W? Anyway, I don't remember the names of all the airports. Point being, Chicago Midway, not the big Chicago O'Hare Airport. And they did it better and cheaper than everybody else, but they advertised like crazy that you could get a better service at a better price. And if they weren't advertising, no one was going to switch what airport they were going to. And Southwest became the juggernaut it is because in that downturn, they doubled down their advertising and aligned it with their strategic goals. So I think that's probably enough for this conversation, because I want to talk about the market for a second, since that's what I do. We are in a season where the market is down. And this little chart is from a website that kind of talked about investing in recession. So you can see the seasons where there are official recessions, which is those kind of yellow triangles on the chart. Every one of those times, if you were to, and this first set might be an extended recession, really, from 79 through 84, really 83 especially. But that 84 timeframe is when this jump really started to happen. But if you were investing in companies and you put down extra during those times where it was going down, then every dollar that you put in bought everything at a cheaper price. And ultimately, as the market came up, you actually earned more per dollar because your cost basis was lower. Okay, so rather than work through the math with you and have everybody glossy-eyed by the end of this, that's the type of webinars I usually go to these days. Let's make it a little bit more fun. Okay, if you said, hey, my return per client is usually I don't know, let's say a transaction per client averages $57. Okay, and that's a small transaction company. Okay, $57. And I told you that, hey, in this downturn, you could gain market share against your competitors. It might cost you less to get that client if we do this right. So bigger market share, cost less to acquire the customer, and your return then by percentage goes much higher. Right? Because if it costs me $8 to acquire a customer, and then all of a sudden, because of the downturn, my competitors are not advertising, they're not marketing, they're not sowing seeds out there, and I am, not only am I taking market share from them because they're not in front of the people, and if everything's going down in price and it costs me less to acquire them, or I can strategically develop a plan that costs me less to acquire them. Now, all of a sudden, I'm getting a bigger pool at a lower price for the same return, and hopefully a better return if we do it right. So that's really what it is. And so when we talk about investing, which is what I do for dollars, when you're investing in a downturn, that's like my mug says, buy the dip, right? You're going to see a much bigger return on your money. So I'll give you a physical example with stocks, and then we'll move on from this if it makes sense. I want to ask a question though before we move on. Let's say I'm buying, I don't know, and I'm going to use fake numbers and a fake company because I don't want to give anybody advice. Let's say I'm buying XYZ company and they're originally $10 a share. And because of the recession, now they're at $7. Now let's go, they're at $5 a share. They've been cut in half, right? And I had 1,000 shares. If I have enough money now at $5 a share where I can throw another 5,000 in, I can buy another 1,000 shares, right? Because I had 1,000, they were at $10 a share. Now they've plummeted to $5 a share. I'm going to buy another 1,000. So my cost basis is now $7.50. So as the market comes back, every time, every cent above $7.50, I am now making money. I don't have to wait for them to get above 10 where I originally bought in. I cut my cost basis down. Mm-hmm. The same sort of thing happens when you're acquiring customers and when you're sowing seeds out. If you can acquire a customer and it costs you $20, but now you can get it for $10 and you can get more market share. That's where you get exponential growth. Mm-hmm. And the really smart companies see downturns as opportunities. So my question to you, Elizabeth, to anybody on the call is, have you ever thought about putting your marketing dollars to work to get a bigger return while you were scared or nervous?
Thought about it, yes. Done it, it's scary. And like you said, while being scared or while being nervous, it's difficult to want to spend those marketing dollars because everyone, especially in my line of work, clients, they tend to pull back a little bit when they hear the words, downturn, recession. They get scared. They don't want to spend, even though, like what you're saying is that this is the best time to double down because less people are spending because of that exact problem. And then you can create more of an advantage by doubling down right now because less people are spending, like cost per clicks are lower, cost of acquisition is lower. But a lot of people don't want to do that because they get scared, and myself included. I get kind of scared and pull back and say, is this the best place to invest right now, or do I need cash to weather the storm? That kind of thing.
Sure. And you bring up a great question there. Do I have enough cash to weather the storm? That's a conversation that you need to have. That's an alignment conversation before you jump into this. But I would tell you what that 82-year-old man told me that day was he would bet the farm again and again. And there are times where it didn't work out, but the times that it did so far outweighed the times that it didn't. And the return was so much higher, it didn't matter. Now, I'm not saying make a foolish decision, right? Don't not be able to pay your mortgage and eat. You should keep that going. But it does pose a big question of how do we align a bigger plan and control what we can control? So I have 4 questions for us to use as a filter for how we build that plan and how we measure our ROI, okay? So the first question, which I think is probably the biggest one, is this: what is your perspective? When you see the waves, when you see recession, is your immediate mindset, oh no, this is gonna crush us? Or is it, hey, there's a real opportunity in this moment? And I can tell you that the biggest determinant of your success is your answer to that question. It's just mindset. Is this opposition or is this opportunity? And if it's opportunity, then we can strategically spend. And so when I'm developing ROI plans, I want to think about long-term and short-term. In the short term, I'm much more tactical, okay? I'm much more hands-on. And in the long term, I'm using that to inform my mindset for what real results need to look like, what measuring sticks we might want to use along the way, and why we would want to use them. Are we comparing to our peers? Is it arbitrary because I think that's what we should get? Like, what is it and why? Okay. So your perspective ultimately determines your outcome. It has the biggest outcome predictor. And so we have to weigh these importance of the immediate versus the ultimate. And so while I can't answer every question for you for your business, I can say that in the short term, when you're building out your marketing strategies and you're putting that to work, the short term can trick you into making decisions that hurt you. And here's what I mean by that. If I can get short-term gains, but it robs my potential future, it's a bad idea. And so many times in recessions, we make short-term decisions rather than keeping the long-term in mind. I'm not saying we don't need to pivot and make changes in the short term, but if you don't have the long-term in mind, the short-term can trick you into making a decision you regret. So that's one of the big pieces there. And so what I mean when it comes to actual numbers is, let's say, you're looking at short term and you're just talking about total revenue. Well, your total revenue while the market is down may go down. But if you scramble to fudge your books, or if you scramble on your plan to do short-term transactions or cut cost, that can have a huge impact down the road. And so when it comes to marketing, that's one of those early things that we tend to say, okay, we're going to cut the marketing budget because it's not a sunk cost like inventory. It's not people where, I have to cut salary. All you're doing is setting up your long-term for failure, because the thing that moves the inventory and the thing that pays the salary isn't going out the door because you stopped marketing. And so you basically become your own worst enemy. And so in the short term, that's a huge perspective shift to think about, how do I double down the sowing to grow during this opportunity rather than give up in the opposition. Okay, so other short-term things. I think what it can do too is help you focus on what's essential. So when you think about ROI, here's a great way to think about it. I want a return. If I have 5 products, but my revenue comes in these 2 products and my gross margin really happens in the 1 product. And if you don't know what those terms are, see Elizabeth, she'll explain all that. But essentially what I'm saying is, if the money is really being driven by 1 product, but I'm spending my time with 5, that's where you say, okay, well, let's get rid of the 3 that aren't working, right? That's where you cut, not the marketing. You get rid of the bloat, and then you double down on what is your key component that is making you the most money. So if you have 4 services, but this 1 service provides 80% of the income, then double down on that in the short term. If there's so much potential in the long term on this other thing, I'm not saying give it up forever, but don't focus on it in a recession. Mm-hmm. Focus on growing the cash so that you can do that long-term thing. Right. And so if you get rid of your marketing, can't do that. So that's a huge ROI conversation that you need to have with your team. If you work with a team, or you and your, whoever does your books, your tax person, anybody like that, you can sit down and you can begin to talk about where that comes from. They'll be able to help. The other thing short term is can help you innovate against your weakness. So in those historical examples that we gave, innovation happened because of the weakness of the market. And so when you see opportunity, perhaps you have something that's not working. Now you can tweak it, you can change it, you can build something new to solve the new problem. That's an entrepreneurial piece, but short-term return on investment, it might make you think about innovating against your weakness, whether that's a product or service change, or whether that is an internal strategy. What you don't want to do is stop marketing, but what you might want to do is market a different way. Okay. And so if you're not seeing the return on investment, then you need to innovate a different way to get in front of your people that are your ideal clients. And that's where having shorter term campaigns, shorter term ideas that are trackable, that all of a sudden becomes, hey, this is a new opportunity. Where do we need to innovate? Where do we need to try? Okay. So having that short term thing. Let's talk about the long term for a second. The long term perspective, what it does is it helps guide you through whatever data is there, and it exposes your flaws and it keeps you on track. So if I don't have some sort of long term goal, and long term for me is 3 to 5 years max, I actually like to think of long term, in those kind of places, not further than that, because so much can change in that time frame. But I want my 3-year goal to be informing my 1-year goal, and my 1-year goal to be informing what I'm doing this quarter. And then second thing is it grounds you. So if I keep the long term in play, what it does is it creates a value system that shapes my decisions, and it doesn't let the emotion of the moment help. It doesn't let the emotion make a wrong decision rather than the right one. So if I said, hey, this is my long-term goal, but I'm going to stop doing this, you might look at me and like, why are you so contradictory? Like, didn't you just say this is what you wanted to do? And now you're doing the opposite. And that's what happens when we start letting the short-term circumstances dictate what we want to do for the long term. So that's actually a return on investment conversation, because you give up, for the immediate, what the ultimate goal is. And we don't want to steal from the future. We want to set it up for success. So mindset is the biggest determinant of outcome. All right. So now the nitty gritty. All right. What is your budget? This is where, if you have the right mindset, you can say, how much can I put? And there's really only 2 things that you have control over. What you do with the money that you have, and what you do with the time that you have. You can't control the results or guarantee it. Okay. You can't control the market and what happens circumstantially out there, what other people do. And so don't worry about it. Get good information and then decide what you're going to do. And so while everyone's business is different, I can tell you that what I have seen historically is that the companies that are making the most spend more money when the market's down, and they grow bigger shares of the market out there. The other piece is, let's say you're a solopreneur or a very, very small business with a small team. That's a lot of us, by the way. Then use your time. You can market yourself in other ways other than just standard marketing, whether it's free online options, whether that is networking. Like, there's other things you can do and get involved in that don't have the same cost, that can be huge returns. And so it's always going to cost you something, time or money, sometimes both, but that's where you need to begin allocating. And so here's my answer to how much should I spend and how much time should I give, right? Elizabeth, you get asked that all the time?
All the time. That's the biggest one.
Okay, so here's my answer, and it's going to be different for everyone, but whatever you think you can give, time-wise or money-wise, give more than that. and here's what I mean is, when you are farming, okay, and you're putting seeds out there, you can't control which seeds multiply into plants versus which ones don't, right? And so what we do know is the more seeds you put in the ground, the more likely you have a bigger harvest, right? I'm not a farmer, but I understand the concept. And so here's where it is. If my mindset is that of long-term, then I see a recession as the biggest opportunities, because other people are getting defensive, cutting budgets. What we're going to do is double down. So where does it start to hurt? Because when I work with business owners so much time, they say, I don't have the time. Sure you do. You're not making the time, and only you can control that. That's not controlled by somebody else. And so we have to get out of the excuse mode, and we have to budget on purpose. So budget is, for a lot of people, a very negative word. I don't want a budget. Well, what a budget does is actually makes you do what you do on purpose with your money, with your time, all of that. And so calendar it out, budget it out on paper. What can you give? And then you can strategically deploy that, right? Just like that. So when we're looking at the metrics, then here's where it gets fun. If I have a business plan and I have these just output goals out there rather than input goals, I have no real way of measuring which piece of business got me that, right? So let's say I wanted in revenue, I wanted net revenue of $500,000, and I'm a small company. Okay, that might be a great goal for somebody, and you want that. That's good. How are you going to get that? And that's where breaking down the percentage of time and money on your input activity and tracking that is going to be the biggest piece. So when we're building business plans with our clients, or we're building investment plans, we're looking at what percentage are we putting where, and what is the expected rate of return. So if I know that when it comes to marketing, if I know that I can get click rate from Facebook ads, and I can spend, I don't know, let's say $1,000 a month. I don't even know if that's a lot for Facebook ads or not, but let's say I can spend $1,000 a month. And I know that the click rate on those ads averages, I don't know, 20%. And that's probably astronomical. I'm totally making these numbers up, but let's say that that's true. Okay. And then I know that those click rates lead to this many people on my website per month, right? Then my input data of Facebook says, okay, if that leads to this many people, then theoretically, if I put $2,000, I might not double it, right? Because it might not hit the same, but theoretically that's more seeds in the ground and more coming back. And so then I can retroactively say, okay, I pushed this button for this 6 weeks. It resulted in this many people on my site. It resulted in this many more transactions from that means. Or let's say it's with my time. Okay. So rather than money, I spent this many hours networking, trade shows, whatever it is that I'm in front of people. It resulted in these particular orders, these particular clients becoming clients. And you have to actually track who signed up where, so that you can know where the best percentage of your time is spent. Because if you spent time at a booth at the fair, since the fair just happened, and you got no clients, versus you spent time at a trade show and you got 20 clients, which one was better? Now that's pretty obvious, none versus 20. But how do you know that unless you're putting all of those things into your business plan per quarter, per 6 weeks, whatever that is? I'm going to try these things and do this. So when we talk about budget, here's where it gets hairy. Because Dominic brought up earlier that, hey, I need to hold on to cash to make sure I can weather this. What we want to teach people is to have some sort of contingency or reserve. And then everything beyond that, put it to work. And so on a contingency or reserve, typically, if you read Scaling Up by a couple of entrepreneurs out of Austin, they'll tell you, if you have 2x annual cash flow, you can experiment with anything and fail spectacularly, and it doesn't matter. All right. And while that's really good, I don't want to waste a year of cash flow, right? So we try to say, like, what's the minimum comfortability list? And so for me, that's usually about 3 months, right? If I have 3 months worth of cash flow, man, anything more than that, I just feel like I'm wasting money because it could be working for me. And so that's where I can't tell you exactly for you. You're going to have to ask those comfortability with risk kind of questions. But I try to keep 3 months for me, and then I want to budget on purpose and tell everything else to where to go beyond that. During inflation times, I actually try to up my cash flow to 4 months, just because I don't know what it's going to look like. So I'm there. And you may be in a season in your business where you're not sure if you can even carry that. I would say to you that's a conflicting priority. You're going to have to discuss that. But if you want the bigger return, you got to put the money to work. And even if you're not sure, that's where you get help from professionals like Elizabeth, who actually have been doing it in the market and can help guide you to the right spot. Because you can only control two things: what you do with the time and the money that you have. So what's your perspective? What's your budget? And those key metrics are really the big ones. We're going to fly through these last two because we're running out of time. But what's your run rate? And this is like, if we were sitting down and talking about retirement, we'd be talking about resiliency rate. How long is your money going to last? Right? Because there comes a point where if you don't have enough, we run out, and that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing for you personally. That's a bad thing for your business. And so what we want to do is we want to create metrics that matter and put them against real data. So let's say, again, you're putting money towards a billboard, or you're putting money towards online ads, or you're putting money into these other things. How long are you going to do that run rate? How are you going to run that campaign? And what's the real data against the time that you have it? The beauty of putting that in front of you is you should have an expected rate of return. And if you don't have an expected rate of return tied to what you are doing, then there's no way to actually measure it. There's no benchmark against which to measure it. I've worked with a number of people that say, hey, we're in front of this many people, or if you put this billboard up, you're going to be seen by this many cars. And that really doesn't mean much to me, because I have no way to measure if those cars are coming in to see me to solve my problem of getting more clients. And so when I'm talking about run rate, I always want to put, okay, I have a budget, I'm going to run it for this long. There is a percentage where I'm looking at how much I spent versus how much I got. If you are in a negative run rate, meaning you're spending and you're not receiving, you can only do that for so long. So you have to put these metrics on plot points or timelines that you evaluate it. Okay, I'm investing here. If I don't see enough return in the short term, I either need to understand, is this where I need longer term, or is this where I need to make a change? And that return on investment piece there, that's the biggest data point that I can say should be informing what you do. If you're working with a professional like Elizabeth, you're below me on the screen. So that's why I keep pointing. If you're wondering, why is he pointing down? And in my list of video people. And so putting a timeline out there with data points and making sure that you're positive on that run rate, which is how much you're spending versus how much you're getting. And then having a budget effectively is planning with a purpose. So eventually, if you don't have the number on your customer acquisition cost, that's how you figure out the number. By which means are you doing? And most companies have a blended customer acquisition cost, meaning they take all their advertising and marketing dollars, they put them out there, they say, this is this year, that's what we spent, this is how many customers we acquired, and then that's how they come up with their number. And when you have that sort of data, now you can begin to invest accordingly. If you don't have the data, you need a time frame where you just put the money out there and get the data. Okay, so run rate, that's the third question. And then finally, what's the sequential plan? And so when you start to get in front of leads, or when you get, opportunity for a transaction or for the sale or for the business, you have to count what conversion looks like. So if they click, that's great. But if they don't buy, why not? Right. And so the marketing piece is to get them to that transactional moment where they are about to do business. If you are not closing that deal, then we need to have other conversations about those qualitative effects of your company or your product or your service. But here's what happens for a lot of people is they get a bad number on their return on investment because they're focused so much on a certain area, they miss out on the sequence behind it. And so as part of your marketing piece, if you're really going to have return on investment, you have to eliminate the barriers once they get there to complete the transaction. That's probably a conversation for a different day, but it definitely is going to affect the number on the ROI. And so what I like to also track is how many people got to the front door but didn't come in the house, right? How many people got to the I want to buy but didn't? And if there's a way that you can track that, if it's all online, you can with thanks to Google Analytics. And if it's not all online and you can track number of people maybe in a physical door, you have to start saying, hey, how'd you hear about us? So there's some other metrics that you need to put in there in your sequential plan so you can truly evaluate and also bring alignment to, okay, now that we've got them in there, the door, how do we cross sell? That's a different conversation for marketing, because once you've got a client, you need to kind of up what's in the bag and how much they spend. So questions about this?
No questions, but a comment. You're extremely thorough, and I learned stuff here. Like, especially in terms of, well, I mean, especially in terms of like tracking and measuring and expected return on investment. Like that's huge for me. That's something I can take action on and implement immediately.
Good. Yeah, I think there's a lot of times where people, instead of using real numbers, they use hope. And I want to have hope, but hope is not a strategy. Right. And so I'm not saying don't be positive and don't think it's going to work. Like, do definitely. Otherwise, why are you doing it? But you should have some sort of expectation for your time and for your money, and against what. And I don't always know. So that's where someone who runs those campaigns, who runs SEO, who runs Facebook ads, who runs other campaigns, billboard, you name it. And I'm just throwing out there because there's so many ways that you could market and advertise. It's literally endless. Someone who's in that space, like Elizabeth, would be able to better tell. But that's where you can say, in these recessions, I'm going to be even more strategic in doubling down my budget towards that. That's been the biggest input that I could say.
Sure. Well, I just want to throw out also, we're talking, I mean, you're giving this is great information. You're talking about customer acquisition. I think we also need the second part of that would also be customer retention.
Sure.
So making sure that, yes, you've got a strategy and metrics in place for customer acquisition, but also a strategy in place for customer retention, because that's where that brand loyalty, that long-term repeat customer is going to be also really important for your business.
So that is something, how would you think you measure that?
That has a lot to do with, I would say, specific campaigns targeted towards people, whether that is, a specific landing page for a sale, tracking it. If it's an email campaign, being able to track your clicks through that and your sales that direction. But also just making sure that just putting those metrics in place.
Yeah.
Through the different.
So if you have a customer acquisition cost and then you have hey, what's my percentage of repeat sales, right? And if you're able to track that it's a repeat sale, either from the credit card or, from the receipt transaction or from, email and click through, or, there's lots of different ways to track that for yourself. But it also increases profitability every time they retransact, right? Because you're not paying to get them again, you've already got them. And so in recession times, marketing to your current clients further to get brand ambassadors and loyalty. And this is where the phone companies do it wrong. They do, hey, you get a free phone if you're a new customer, right? That's the worst. I want my free phone. Oh, that's only for new people. Yeah, and guess what? I'm leaving. I'm going over there because there are new people over there. And they do it wrong. What they need to do is you get the same deal. And so T-Mobile finally came out with that this past year, and their sales are through the roof, whereas Verizon and AT&T are down year to date. One campaign, but that you're absolutely right, hitting it on the head. So I would say that's part of the sequential plan for me. It wasn't necessarily in my talking point there, but yeah, that's where I'd place that.
Definitely. Did you have one more question that we needed to think about? Or was that the fourth one?
That's the fourth one, sequential
Okay.
plan. So
very good.
Yeah. Obviously there's more that we probably should talk about, and I'd love to get into people's specific numbers or metrics, on how they want to track that. But the big things for me are input activity versus output results. And if you find some ratio or some percentage points with specific times that you can measure over, that's going to help inform you make the best decision.
This is such valuable information, and I know so many people that don't measure. And that your comment about hope is not a strategy is so very true, because that's, I think 99% of the people I talk with, that's how they approach marketing, is without any type of metrics, any type of how does this, how does this play into the big picture of achieving your business goals and what your long-term success looks like. It's just measuring, just the different aspects of your business and understanding those metrics. It's not always easy, but it is probably one of the most important things you can do.
Well, at one point in the 2008 campaign for the iPhone and iPod video, iPod Touch that came out, Apple was spending 43% on advertising and marketing of their total budget. Now, their revenue was high enough that they could do that and still make money, but their total budget, they were spending 43%. So that'll just give you an idea. I think you can't ever outspend it.
True. Very, very true. Well, thank you so much for being with us, for giving us incredibly valuable information. I wanted to share a couple things right before we wrapped up. So next month, we're going to be talking about digital marketing, because I think this, evaluation and ROI is a huge question I get. I think the next one I get is about digital marketing, because this one is a beast and there's so much confusion around what you should be doing, how to do it. It's a newer tactic, but Jenna Parkreader with Huddle Masses is going to be kind of demystifying digital marketing for us. How to explain kind of all the variety of tools and platforms that are out there, and how you can effectively use digital marketing to grow your business. And I'm excited. Again, like today, I pulled so much information out of this. And when I spoke with Jenna, it was the same. There are just so many components to marketing. And this is a really important one to understand and get your arms around. So I'm excited about that. And then I really just wanted to end by saying thank you to everyone who was able to attend today. I I really enjoy these webinars. I learned so much. And for me, it's all about just adding value and being able to educate people about all of the different things about marketing, so that you are more comfortable having these conversations, whether you're talking with your internal staff, whether you are working with a professional, just being able to better understand marketing and how to utilize it for your business. I love talking to people about marketing. So if you ever want to have a conversation to talk about your marketing needs, you can schedule a call with me at kingprmarketing.com/meet us. And you can schedule 30 minutes and we can just chat, or we can meet up somewhere if that's better for you too. So with that, I'm going to give you guys your day back, and thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Elizabeth, for putting this on.
Oh, you are very welcome.